hesitate. If I get any one message across to you tonight, don't be afraid of us. Don't hesitate to call us. I passed around handouts. If you didn't get them, maybe we can pass some back around. But our address, phone number, website are here on top of this front page, and that's probably the most important thing I can give you tonight, because we do want to help you, with the not help you with the fundraising, help you raise the right amount of funds, the right type of funds, keep you on track, and then help you with your reports when the reports are due. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are a small staff. In fact, we're having a hard time keeping people on the staff, but the ones that are there are dedicated to helping you. So if I get any message across to you tonight, it's that. We're there to help you. Much rather help you do things the right way than to have to try to come along later and clean it up and maybe issue penalties. We don't like to do that. We like to make sure everybody's on track to start with. So just kind of take it a step back now. What is the Registry of Election Finance? And like Ross said, when you run for office, you got to do a lot of things. You have to get on the ballot. So that you're going to go. You do that with your Secretary of State in Frankfort, depending on which office you're running for, or maybe it's the county clerk here in Jefferson County, depending on which office you're running for. I know which is which, but I'm happy to answer those questions. It's kind of out of my lane, but one or the other, you have to file to run for office. But along with that, you have to file with the Registry of Election Finance, and one gets you on the ballot, and one, our agency deals with, as you campaign, the funds you raise and the money you spend on those campaigns. So it's kind of a two-part thing. You have to register with the county clerk or Secretary of State, and you have to register with the Registry of Election Finance. Our registration, and it goes by different names. Some people still call it the KREF 001 because that's the old paper form. Some people call it the Statement of Spending Intent, and some people just say it's a pain and you got to log in, you got to get in there and do it. But all we're doing is tracking your spending and your campaign finance fundraising. The registry itself, like I said, is small. We have right now, maximum staff we have is 13. We're back down to 11. Typically we have 3 administrators that are dedicated to helping candidates with their reports. You'll get to know your administrator. We divide them up by alphabet, so depending on what your last name starts with is which administrator you'll get. Obviously, we try to cover for each other. Sometimes you may be stuck with me trying to help you with your report if we're busy. Sometimes we have one that handles committee, so if you're on the committee here, you probably deal with Jeff Clark. He's the only administrator I have to help with committees. But somebody will help you. You call in and ask for help, somebody will get you the right person. The registry is made up of, we answer to a board, it's a 7-person board, and I think it's almost it's pretty unique in that it has to be bipartisan. I know the State Board of Elections has to be also, but we're even more bipartisan, I think, or nonpartisan. We alternate appointments, so if a Democrat's appointed, the next one has to be Republican, vice versa. The members are appointed by various state officials. The governor gets 4 appointments, but he has to choose. He has to get one recommendation from the Democratic Party, one from the Republican Party, and then 2 others have to, like I said, have to alternate, but be recommended to him from fair elections groups. And the Secretary of State gets 1 appointment. The Attorney General gets 1 appointment, and the state auditor gets 1 appointment. So it's really good, fair, balanced board. Most of the time you don't need to worry about the board. If you had to appear before the board, that means you're probably in trouble. So that's all I'm going to say about them. But it is we're very nonpartisan. Staff is, and the board is certainly. We have a regulation that says we can't even be involved in politics. We can't raise funds. We can vote. That's about it. Keep our opinions to ourselves for the most part. So. And I enjoy that kind of situation. I don't like the partisan part of politics, so I get to see the kind of the good part, both sides and in the candidates. So what you need to know as far as what to do with us, like I said, everything has to be done electronically now, and since 2020, all reports have to be filed electronically. We used to have paper. If you've been around for a while, you may remember filing on paper or filing that old 001 form with your clerk or Secretary of State, but now it's all done electronically. And I'm not going to sit here and try to do a demonstration on how to get into our electronic filing system. Some of you may know it's not the most friendly thing sometimes. Keep making improvements. The The system remains under development. I have to talk to the legislature periodically about that. But I think we've made a lot of progress. The 001, when you know what you want to run for, you file to run for it, you get on the ballot, and that's all you're telling us. You're going to log in, you'll get your own distinct login to the state system, and then you'll go into our system specific, and that first thing is to register what you're running for with us. You tell us who you are, name, address, everything, what office you're running for. At that point, you pick a treasurer. All campaigns will have a treasurer. You may be your own treasurer, and you'll note that in what in your registration, or you may have a separate treasurer, and we'll need their information as well. If you select a treasurer, you and the treasurer kind of have equal access to your reports and equal legal responsibility for them filing them as well. Usually the smaller campaigns oftentimes just have themselves as treasurer. That's a box you check, say I'm gonna be my own treasurer. Larger campaigns we'll have a separate treasurer typically because more money's coming in, so that makes sense. One of the other things, besides naming your treasurer, the other key thing you do in that statement of spending intent with us, as the name suggests, is you say how much you're going to raise. Not specifically, but there's two choices, two tiers. If you're going to have a larger campaign, and probably a lot of the Jefferson County ones, well, there's a lot of small towns in Jefferson County too, but county-wide and statewide, you're going to spend over $3,000 probably. If you're running for one of those city councils that Jefferson County is full of, as an example, you're probably going to spend less than $3,000. Most counties, I'll say, if you're running for school board, you're probably going to spend less than $3,000, but not Jefferson County. They're usually bigger races, I know. But that's your two choices. Are you going to raise or spend $3,000 or less, or are you going to spend more than $3,000? And you tell us that on this form that you're submitting to us, and that determines what your reporting requirements will be. And you'll see in one of these pieces of paper I gave you is the schedule of reports that be filed. If you're a small campaign under $3,000, you're only going to have to file one report with us, and that's the 30-day post-election report. So we will not be a big factor in your election. If you're an over $3,000 candidate, you're going to be filing regular reports with us both before the election and after the election. And I kind of gave you this last page and this little handout, and all this information is available on our website, but last page is the 2024 dates that are important to you. I did put in some of the filing deadlines for office, like somebody mentioned earlier. Obviously January 5th is the deadline to file to run in the primary. But following that, I have when your reports would be due with us, just so you have this handy if you choose to run. While we're talking about this sheet, you have up until 30 days before the primary to change your spending intent. You may think, I'm going to file to run for office. I don't expect to have an opponent. I don't need to worry about raising much money. And then, on that last day, somebody may file to run against you, and you realize I'm going to need a bigger campaign. Well, you can go into our system and amend the spending intent to say, okay, I'm going to need to raise over $3,000 now. You have up until 30 days before the election to do that. So keep that in mind. 30 days is kind of the key. 30 days out from the primary is the first date you really need to worry about filing something with us. It may be that 30-day pre-report, or it may be I have to amend my spending intent and file that report. You have up until 30 days before the election. And I know I'm kind of all over the place. Feel free to interrupt me and ask questions as I go. So just keep that 30-day out. Yes, go ahead. Did you have a question?
Somebody says they're going to raise a bunch of money, and then they say, oh, I don't think I'm going to have to do that.
You can go down the other way too. You can reduce it down to under 3,000. It's just, you just really have to track it because it's an automatic $500 penalty if you do something you say you're not going to do. So if you say, I'm not going to raise over 3,000, you go over by $1. The way the statute's written, it's an automatic $500 penalty, and that we have no flexibility there either. So be sure yourself when you select that spending intent, especially once you lock it in.
So I will piggyback off what he said about just what you're going to raise. size of Jefferson County, the amount of voters that you're looking at, you are more than likely going to need to file as your race is over $3,000 unless you're doing a small city race. So like, even to be honest, some people for J-Town, I think something about it, J-Town City Council this year, some of them may decide to spend more than $3,000. Some will be like, nah, I ain't been on here for the last 12 years, you know what I mean? Same with Charlotte. Charlotte City Council, a lot of people didn't spend more than $3,000 for that small city race. But if you're running for a metro council race, a state race, school board race in Jefferson County, you're gonna spend more than $3,000.
Yes.
You should be spending more than $3,000.
Hey, Rose, since we're filming this.
Oh.
I want to keep it to him. Can we, and like, then we can do a quick Q&A later.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I opened it up.
Get that to happen.
Got it.
No.
I will just kind of summarize what was said. Emphasis was made, and I alluded to it, was if you're running in Jefferson County, most likely you're going to be running an election where you need to raise over $3,000. And then I'll talk to the group, I know this is going out to some other counties, smaller races in the counties, usually, I'll give some examples, usually the county school boards outside Jefferson County and probably some of the other more populated areas. City councils in most locations, even some of the magistrate positions, often don't raise over $3,000 across the state. But in obviously the more populated areas, you're going to spend more money, and you should probably go into the election cycle assuming you're going to spend more than $3,000, and just go ahead and file that intent with us up front to be over $3,000. What that does, honestly, if I was running for something, I'd just go ahead and put over $3,000 because it's not that big of a deal. It's going to put you on the automatic email reminders from us that tells you, hey, you've got a report due. And if you didn't raise anything, then you hit that button, you click it a couple times inside our reporting system, and you can submit a report that says 0 on it with literally 3 clicks maybe. It's just not that hard to file the reports anymore once you're in there. Honestly, the hardest thing is probably getting that login, remembering it or writing it, making sure you write it down somewhere. We have so many people forget, and once you forget, then you have to go through that whole normal process, reset your password and all that. But if you keep track of that, you follow our reminders, you won't have that hard of time submitting those reports. So, and what do those reports require? Not that much information. If somebody gives you money, somebody writes you a check for $1,000, you have to keep up with it. That's what you report to us. You report the money that comes in, just like your bank account. Think of our reporting system like a bank account. Money comes in, money goes out. Who'd the money come from? You got a check from, Mr. Smith down the street. You got a check from the lady at the bank. Whatever. Personal checks, of course. I'll get into that too. But whoever you get money from, keep track of it. You report it in our system. How you spend the money? You spent $1,000 on yard signs, $1,000 on door hangers or a fundraising event. That's what you report to us. So money in, money out, keep track of it and report it. And when I say keep track of it, when you get money from someone, it should be in the form of a check, but there's a lot of other ways to raise money now. So I say should, but it used to be check was kind of the only way. Now you can use, without getting into it too much, you may have something on your website that allows them to donate right there. As long as that is capturing the information you would think would be on a check, like name, address, phone number, along with place of employment and occupation are also 2 things that have to be submitted. You have to keep track of. And that's a little bit unusual, but and then again, when you spend the money, it's who'd you send it to, who'd you pay, address, that sort of information. We have actually candidate guidebooks. We used to print them. If you go to our homepage, which again is here, you will find links to guidebooks, PDF guidebooks for candidates, our committees, right there on our homepage. There's some blue boxes right near the top, and embedded within in there PDFs of candidate guidebooks, and that breaks down really well everything I'm saying. Like, who can I get money from? What do I have to report? What information do I need to collect? We actually even have examples of contributor cards in there you can print out that and have someone have people fill them out as they give you contributions. which captures that information you have to have in order to feed that information to our system. As you raise money, keep in mind you cannot accept checks from I'll quit using checks. The statutes still use checks. We need to update it to more modern terms, but you cannot accept funds from corporations of any kind, not just large incorporated type entities, but LLCs as well, which you may think, some people may say, well, that's just a private business, but if it's incorporated in any way, you cannot accept a check from that entity.
And I've had them from lawyers, law firms, that it's an LLC or something, and, you know, even though they kind of use that as their personal banking account.
Yeah, even if it's still an LLC, yeah. If a law firm wants to give you a check, make sure it's from the individuals, not even if it's a private practice. Usually they're incorporated in some way for liability purposes. They still need to write a check to you, a personal check to you. And that is something we see often, not often, but it happens that it's a small solo practitioner or something, and in their mind, my firm, my checking account, it's all me. But if it's incorporated, you have to make that distinction and ask them for a personal check. There are sometimes sole proprietorships, like you may have a guy that's a painter and truly isn't incorporated. It's just, you know, John's painting. In that case, that would be okay to accept a check from, but most of the time you're going to deal with incorporated businesses, and you have to avoid those. Obviously, you can't take contributions from a business. There's two kinds of ways to accept contributions: monetary contributions and what we call in-kind contributions. That could be food, use of space like this, use of tables, chairs, entertainment, speaker systems. Those can't come from corporations either. They have to be given to you, loaned to you from individuals. So everything has a value that you use in your campaign, whether it's monetary or in-kind, and you would report those in-kind gifts as well. So if someone gives you food for something, make sure it comes from an individual, like not from, I don't know, Bob's Barbecue Incorporated. The Bob's Barbecue can't give you that food. Bob himself can give it to you if he makes it in his kitchen or whatever. So keep those type of things in mind. Yes.
Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Because we had an issue before where I had a person who was a graphic designer. That was one of their occupations. So they in-kinded us a logo, but then they said it was a business. It would be considered a business donation. So we had to pay for that logo at the market rate. So would that be the same for like Bob, who is a caterer? Yeah,
if you can pay Bob for his food.
Right, but he can't give you that to you in kind. Just Bob can't decide to do that if he owns a catering business, if that's his occupation.
Yeah, I see what you're. So you're saying that, yeah, there's a narrow distinction there. Bob may say, I want to do this for the candidate that I support. He has to be real careful to separate out from his business, and it probably can be done. That graphic designer was probably the same thing. They probably, in their head, they were just doing it for the candidate, but if they have a business, it's hard to separate the individual from the business for this purpose.
So is there a way to do that in the reporting correctly, or is that just, if that's their main occupation, it wouldn't count? Like it would count as a business thing?
I mean, if you can show in your reports that, you know, Bob himself cooked the barbecue up and gave it to you, versus Bob at his business with his employees cooked that up and gave it to you.
Right.
Same.
Like if Bob just happens to come to your house and it just happens to look industrial and there just happens to be food and he's like, you know what, I can work with this, and he cooks it
Gotcha. If you're having a fundraiser
at Bob's house.
Bob's house, and Bob's in there cooking in his kitchen,
Yeah.
probably in-kind given situation.
That makes sense.
And does it have to be reported like that?
Yeah. But if Bob wants, picking on Bob, but if Bob wants to give you and Bob has to be careful not to give you like a discount on, if you buy it from Bob, he also has to be kind of fair market value of what he's selling it to you for, the barbecue. Yeah.
Okay.
Can we
take it back to the graphic design.
Okay.
If the person doesn't have a business with graphic design, but does the design for you, is that something you can consider in kind, or is that something you have to pay for?
Yeah, if someone, so the question is kind of if someone wants to provide a graphic design for your campaign, they don't do it to make for a living. They don't have a business doing that, at least.
Yeah.
But they want to do that for you and contribute it to your campaign. They're doing that as an individual, and an individual can give you an in-kind contribution or a monetary contribution.
Okay.
So yeah, so if that has a value of, and it's hard to place, then you get into what's the value of that. Is it $500 or is it $10? I don't know.
Yeah, I sort of like
Yeah.
So,
So
and that's the reason why I brought up that example, because that happened with me in the
Yeah.
report. But the thing of it was that person had donated on another time, and they listed their occupation as graphic designer. So then by the time it was the in-kind donation was filed, it automatically put that person up as graphic designer. And it was kicked back like, oh, this is a business that's donating this because this is this person's occupation. And so they literally said, if this person was a teacher and made a graphic for you, that would count as in-kind.
yeah,
But because this person has listed, this is their occupation, it now becomes a business that's doing that for you.
That makes sense.
yeah.
So,
I think that's a good way to distinguish it. So, if you want me to sum it up for the camera. Okay, that pick up. Yeah, so think of it that way. If it's what somebody does to make a living and has a business doing that, then you're probably not going to be able to take it as a contribution, in-kind donation. But if that's something they do just because they're good at it and want to do it for you, then that could be an in-kind. With regardless of whether it's in-kind or monetary, there is a limit on the value. It's $2,100 per election is all you can accept from an individual, and you have to. It can be $2,100 monetary, or it can be $2,100 in-kind value, or it can be a combination. It could be they wrote you a check for $1,000, they gave you a graphic design worth $1,000, whatever it happens to be. But you have to add those two together. It's not two separate pots of money. $2,100 monetary, $2,100 in kind. It's $2,100 total value to your campaign per election. So the primary is one election, and the general election is another election, which gets us to why you have to do a spending intent with us twice, in part, is because, don't forget that too, you may run in the primary, you may not expect an opponent, you're going to have a small campaign, less than $3,000, you submit your intent to us, you move on from the primary to the general, you're going to have to resubmit a spending intent with us. We will send you an email, we'll create that for you, but you have to go in there again and say, okay, now it's a general election. Obviously, you're still running. It'll be pre-populated with what you're running for, all your personal information. But you need to go in there and say, okay, now in the general, I'm going to spend more than $3,000, and re-sign it, and check that box, re-sign it, and resubmit it, so we know what your spending intent will be for the general, and you will have a new filer number for the general. So the system will keep those two fundraising or campaigns separate. So you'll reset your contribution limits for the general that way in our system, and with a new filer number, and we'll know what to expect you're going to raise. So don't forget, if you move from the primary to the general, you do have to go back in our system and at least sign off on this intent we'll create for you, which you'll get an email about. We communicate with you, and we're getting better about that as the system gets better. I think our emailing gets better about reminders, but we'll tell you, hey, there's a new intent for you for the general. Go in there. I don't know how specific it gets, but basically you need to go in there and touch this intent. Tell us what you're going to spend. Tell us if you've made any other changes, and sign it and submit it again. And then that creates that new filer number. So you start getting notices for the general, even while the primary may still be open, because you don't have to close the primary right away. You can have both accounts open. In fact, you can have more than that. Some people do, but usually we recommend, once you know you've paid all your bills for the primary, go ahead and close it out, whether it's on that 30-day post report or 60-day post. It's best just to close that out. Move your money forward. If you won, move the money forward to the general so you can spend it in the general election. If you have a balance left after the primary, you can roll that into your general, and the system will system will let you transfer that forward once you have a new filer number for the general. Assuming you're running for the same thing. Now, if you ran in the primary for, and this happens sometimes, you ran for state rep and the primary got beat, and you decide you want to run for a city council that didn't have a Jeffersonville, they don't have a primary. You could actually turn around and file in the general for that, but you can't use money you raised for state rep race for a city council race or anything else.
What can you do with that money?
If you say you ran in the primary and lost and you have money left, you've got 5 options. One is to give it back to the people who contributed it to you, which is really hard because you spent a bunch of it probably. It's kind of hard to do that. 2 is to give it to charity. 3 is to, well, it would be to, if you decide to run for state rep 2 years later, again, you can keep it and run 2 years later, or move it to your general if you won. You can give it to your state or local county executive committee. So if you ran in Jefferson County, you can give it to the Jefferson County Democratic Party, or you can give it to the state party, or you can give it to the caucus campaign committees. Usually you only see that. Well, if you ran for state rep, you might want to give it to the state Democratic House caucus. I think I covered them all there. Or you can give it to the state.
How do you get in debt? And how do you fix that?
How do you do that?
Yeah, how do you get campaign debt?
Oh, debt. If the primary is over, we'll focus on the primary. If you have debt remaining after the primary, you can keep raising money for it. The only way you can keep raising money after an election is if you have debt.
But how do you get debt?
How do you get debt?
Yeah.
I guess you spend more money than you took in. I mean, yeah, it's you come out, you bought more campaign signs, had more fundraisers than you took in money, so you still owe a vendor, or the candidate. A lot of times the candidate puts their own money in, and unfortunately, if you lose an election, people kind of lose interest in giving you money. But and a lot of times we see the candidate just what we call assume the debt. Basically, you're going to just take it on yourself, and it's all in the system. Which you have that choice on that 30-day post report. You have choices whether to, if you don't have debt, you can close out. If you do have debt, you can assume it, or you can keep it open to keep raising money.
Makes sense.
Okay.
I thought of that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At the end of your election, if you have money left over, you can't like buy gifts for your volunteers or something? Is that silly?
That would be probably a no. You could have. You're allowed to do things for your volunteers. I'm not.
It's over.
Yeah.
Like an appreciation party.
I don't have a statute or regulation in front of me how it's worded, but
I'll call you.
yeah, call me about that. That's a way to spend money, but if you really say you spend $1,000 doing that, but you had $1,500 left, you could still donate that. Yeah, the true closeout. I know that provision because we get that question a lot. But
Volunteers might prefer that you donate it back to the.
I mean, you can use money to feed your volunteers and things like that too. So you can probably work it in. A lot of it falls on the candidates. If you can justify it as part of your campaign, then we're probably not going to say no to it. A lot of times, unfortunately, some of the smaller campaigns, it's the candidate's own money anyway they're spending. So,
Are there occupations that have limits on how much they can donate? Like a tax attorney, I don't know.
oh no, it's all the same limit, $2,100, and that limit changes. Sometimes it used to be $2,000. Well, it used to be $1,000. Legislature changed it to $2,000. When they did that, they set a way that we had to look at it every 2 years and kind of adjusted. Saying it's adjusted for inflation is oversimplification. It's some kind of cost of living adjustment, basically. So if it's a certain percentage, it'll go up by $100. We round. We don't round that. We round it. So if it's math. It's a lot of math. But that's why it went up $2,100 this year. So it's a slow increase if it increases at all.
Is there a cap on how much a candidate can donate to their own?
There is no, the question is there a cap on how much a candidate can donate to their own campaign, and there's not. There was a time when there was, I think it was before, I've been with the registry since 2015. I think it was changed before that even. So there's no cap. You can give as much money as you want to your own campaign. The candidate can. Now the spouse, you have to treat separately, which gets complicated if you have joint bank accounts, but if you're married and your spouse has a separate finances, and they're limited to that $2,000 as well.
So the spouse can't. So the spouse has that 2,100.
2,100.
One.
Yeah.
So each one can donate 21 from the same.
Well,
account.
the candidate himself or herself can donate as much as they want. If they have a joint bank account, that gets into the legality of who owns that bank account. So it's all coming out of a joint bank account, then it's all considered the candidate's.
What about a couple that's not the candidate?
A couple that's not a candidate can each give 2,100 from the same account. Yeah. Good questions. The state, we're talking about limits. Permanent committees can only give candidates $2,100 as well. Most people call them PACs. The statute refers to them as permanent committees, so we try to stick with that language. Contributing organizations, $2,100. Corporations, like I said, prohibited. Executive committees, so the state executive committee and the county executive committees can give unlimited amounts to candidates. The same with the caucus campaign committees. Other questions we get, what if I'm a candidate and I want to attend another candidate's fundraiser event? You can do that, but it's $200 limit. What the statute tries to do is prevent someone. You may have a candidate that's a great fundraiser, been around forever, never has any opposition, still raises money. You don't want, what the statute tries to prevent is that candidate from just dumping a bunch of money into a new candidate's campaign account. So they're limited to like $200 per event or something if from their account, campaign account, to another candidate's campaign account.
Per event or per candidate?
Per event,
So like I can attend Roz's events multiple times and each time donate 200.
Yes, I
Is there a
think
cap on how much?
it gets. We say it's 2,100 still. Yeah.
But doesn't that candidate that's donating needs to maintain some sort of record of an invitation
Yes.
or something?
Yeah. So in the candidate that's spending the money out of their account has to report that to us, and the candidate receiving it has to report it. So there's a cross check there too. And of course, an individual, the candidate as an individual person can always write a check for 2,100 maximum too.
And they wouldn't count as like.
They would. No, it's two. It's almost, think of yourself as two. Think of a candidate and a
That counts too.
the individual has limits, and then the candidate has limits.
So is there a way, so say for instance, if I'm campaigning and that becomes my job, because I can't work in campaign, is there a way for a candidate to raise money to cover their personal living expenses? Because that becomes their position.
Like, could I pay my rent?
No, there's nothing, and I'm not saying that. I'm not making a judgment call here. I'm just saying the statute doesn't allow for that right now. We have said by opinion only. It's not in the statute, although there's been bills filed that would allow a candidate to pay child care expenses out of their campaign funds if they're out campaigning and they need somebody for child care, not if they're not.
Not their weekly child care.
Right, not their wicked child care, but anything that's caused by them being trying to campaign.
Okay.
If they need to pay child care for that, we've said by opinion that that's okay to use campaign funds for.
And then the candidate could pay mileage.
Yes.
Could build.
Yeah, gas. Any expenses involved with pertaining to the campaign can be reimbursed out of the campaign fund.
Right, but we can't pay your rent.
No, because that's not really that exists whether you're a candidate or not. Now, a campaign, you can pay a treasurer a salary, a reasonable
So what
salary.
if you are your own treasurer?
Huh? Ooh, look at that. I don't know about that one.
Just probably later.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'd have to think about that one.
You're your own treasurer and you're paying for treasury services.
Yeah.
Does that count?
I don't know about that.
What if I keep a great time log?
Great, like
Like, you know exactly when I'm clocking in, clocking out.
for yourself?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I don't know. We'd have to think about that one. Huh?
I mean, I'm just throwing at it just because of.
No, it's a fair question because you're taking time. Yeah, I'm not giving you a yes or no. I'm just saying I can see you could say, well, I'm taking time. Okay, I'm the candidate. I'm out there campaigning, but I also had to come home and take care of these checks I got and enter it into your filing system and everything else.
So you
That
could
takes time.
Technically, you could bill your campaign for your treasury services, and that can be made payable. to you.
Possibly, yeah.
Okay.
I'd argue that for you in front of camera.
How do you feel,
Yeah.
you have a tax ID number to deal with?
Yeah, like you would have to. Yeah, you can get an EIN number for your treasury services, but even then, it doesn't have to be a business to bill for treasury services. So it can be a person that you're paying for your treasury services.
Yeah, I agree.
Just like you would pay any other staff.
That's potential. If you're serious about that, follow up with me and I'll.
Oh, I'm definitely serious.
Okay.
Well, like anybody has enough money to
Can
do
you
that.
actually summarize that, what you just said? 'Cause
Okay.
there's a lot of chatter.
The question, and it's not a question I've heard before, is if you are serving as your own treasurer, can you as the candidate, pay you as the treasurer a salary or for the treasury services? Because there is a provision in the statutes that says a campaign can pay a treasurer a reasonable amount. I forget how it's worded, but something for their services. And we've never had a question where can the candidate pay themselves for doing the same thing that a separate treasurer would do. So I think there's a potential we might be able to say yes to that, but I don't want to. Yeah.
I can submit it formally in writing for you to come back with an answer later.
Yeah, do that because that's a good question. I think it's a good question.
We spoke about the 2,100 limits. Do you think that accomplishes the goal that limits serve?
The question is, does the $2,100? I'm smiling because that's a difficult question, but the question is, do the limits, the contribution limits, serve the purpose they're meant to? And I'll just give you my honest opinion. I think.
I love that.
And this shouldn't sound partisan because I don't mean it to be partisan, but we see that all the independent expenditures that are made by all these outside groups that have no limits, and then we see what candidates can raise themselves, and it's like, I don't know. I don't know the answer, but when you have independent expenditures of $1 million, routinely, and then you see a candidate can only raise $100,000 themselves because of this contribution limits, I don't know. I think contribution limits are good, but I think this is just John Steffen talking. This isn't official. You asked the question. I'll give you an answer. That the independent expenditures that all these corporations and things can make just overwhelm what you as an individual candidate can raise. Now, the governor did really well with his, and again, I'm not being partisan. I'm just saying, you look at the numbers coming in, you look at Bashir's reports, you see these huge numbers of contributors and huge dollar amounts at the end of the day compared to his opponent who had much fewer contributors and much less money. So it did kind of there, but then I never have done the math on the independent expenditures. Yeah, I've not done the math, and we have, that's all on our website too, but I've not looked to see how much was spent from these outside groups, corporations and things on Bashir and how much was spent on Cameron. I've not done the numbers, but I'm surprised some reporter hasn't done it, and maybe they have, I just didn't see it, but
I think I've seen it someplace,
Yeah.
at least before the.
But there was a lot spent. I will say there was a lot of independent expenditures made, and I just, in glancing at them as I put them on our website, there was a lot made on both sides behalf, and some for the other candidates too. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it's an ongoing debate nationwide. There's the dark money, which is usually the independent expenditures, some of who have to report to us what they spent, but not the source of their money. Whereas the candidates are really responsible, and I think they should be. I think the candidates should have to report where their money comes from, and I think there should be limits. But it's a balancing act. Like, I don't know if we're there or not. I think you had your hand up longer.
Okay, I don't know how this is gonna sound, but what if I use my own money and then later, could I get it back through the campaign?
Yeah. So the question is, what if? And again, I'm repeating this because I'm being recorded. The question is, what if a candidate uses their own money? Can they get it back later through the campaign? And the answer is yes. You can loan your campaign. Say you want to get started, you want to put $10,000 in up front before you start doing much fundraising because you need money to fundraise. You can loan your campaign $10,000. Then as you get that money from other sources, you can pay yourself back.
Do you have
So
to
absolutely.
pay yourself back?
What? I'm
Do
sorry.
you have to pay yourself back?
You don't have to. No.
And you can either forgive it, or you can carry it forward.
Right, and you can, at the end of the day, you can forgive your own debt yourself, or absorb the debt yourself, or assume it, or you can just carry it forward, as we talked about earlier. I think we had another question. Yes.
Yeah, if you're, for example, I'm the treasurer for a candidate who's already filed, already fundraised. Is there a filing report due at the end of this year, this calendar year?
Not anymore. Well,
There's not, so I don't need to have a deadline of 12/31.
no. I'm assuming it's what your
State
can.
House race.
Yeah, there was a time when you would have had to file a quarterly report, but the legislature changed that
So we don't
requirement.
have to
No,
file until-
the only candidates who had to file quarterly would be statewides.
Didn't we have something due on the 5th?
You had an annual report.
Like if you raised money before the 5th, you had to file it by the 5th. So that,
That's what I'm asking, yeah. Like my candidate has already raised thousands of dollars.
You would file that on your 30-day pre-election report would be where you file that.
So not January 5th.
No. There was an annual report due.
so I raised money before December 5th.
Yeah.
And
You
my election's not till May. And I was told to file a report by the 5th. And
Of
so I did.
January?
because when did your candidate file to run?
December 6th.
So it was after, yeah.
So I-
That's why you had an annual due because your campaign was before you started raising money before that.
So our first file was until April 21st.
Is that what it says? Yes. Yeah. That's the difference.
Don't put it off, though.
Put it off until 11:58, just like college.
So technically, your report's due the 23rd, but
Due by means due by.
you cover everything from now from the beginning of the campaign to the 21st. Yeah. I wasn't me, it was the legislature. I was against it. I wanted quarterly reports for everybody, but
I have another question that I sometimes get, unless there was another one. No.
but I think you was a tie. Go ahead.
So say there's a group that you've heard whisperings that is also trying to fundraise money for you. Are you and that group allowed to talk?
It depends. If that group wants to make independent expenditures on your behalf, and independent expenditures have no limit on how much they can spend, then they cannot talk to you at all. You can't coordinate with them in any way, and that's really important to remember. Now, if they just want to support you and contribute money to you within the contribution limits, then you can communicate. But keep in mind, if supporting you means spending money on your behalf, then it's limited. But I know it's kind of hard. How do they support you and not talk to you at all? But you can't coordinate efforts. So if you do, then this contribution limits apply. But if you don't, then it's independent expenditures, and that's when they can spend whatever they want on you, which is not a bad thing. My problem with independent expenditures is when they don't have to report the sources, or But sometimes you may have a permanent committee that has to report to us where they get their money, but they may also want to do independent expenditures, and even the executive committees, the parties can do independent expenditures too if they may want to do a blast to support all the Democratic candidates in Jefferson County, and they can do that and not have to. Well, they don't have any limits anyway, so that's a bad example. But does that make sense?
Yeah.
There was
what they decide to do.
Yeah.
Separate confines, and then when in doubt, email K-Rap.
There was a candidate in the Republican primary for governor that was getting a lot of money from an outside group, or getting a lot of money spent on her behalf from an outside group that that her husband was heavily involved in. So it's really hard to believe those independent expenditures. Yeah.
So like if they're sitting here paying for their own flyers, paying for their own door hangers, that's the unlimited expenditures on the behalf, but not.
Yeah, if there's somebody like on the other side of Jefferson County right now making up things to support you and you have no idea what they're doing, then they can spend as much money as they want for you. But if they've called you up and say, hey, what do you want these to look like, then that's coordination and you can't.
I respect that.
Okay.
I also really appreciate you trying to say which governor candidate.
You'd be a great talk show host. I'd watch
Even though
you.
we all knew.
Can you ref it now?
Well, also,
Okay, so I spent a lot of time here before I ran for office, and I've seen candidates name their staff, like their campaign staff, when they pay them, and I've seen candidates not do that. But you know they're paying somebody, it's like they're paying a payroll service to pay the person. Instead
Oh.
of naming that instead of naming the actual employee. Like, do you have to name your campaign manager's name, or your secretary, or your treasurer's name?
I don't really know how you would avoid it, because I'm picturing, I know people pay payroll services, but usually the payroll services, don't they usually have a name, like Acme Payroll or something, or?
Yeah. I mean, you want me to tell you the name of the payroll service?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying, when you've seen that in KREF, you have to be specific about who you're paying.
Yeah, I was like looking in this person's KREF, and it's like they have the payroll service listed, and I was like, what is that? So I Googled it, saw the payroll service, I was like, oh, they're paying somebody.
Yeah.
Who are they paying?
No, but it's a business they're paying.
Well,
Right.
no, so like, I guess,
So the payroll service is paying the 6 people on payroll.
Yeah.
So on their expenditure,
Oh.
it looks like they're only sending out one check for $30,000 this month. But you don't know where that money is going, who that money is going to via the KREF report. It's just going because the check is made payable to the payroll service, and then the payroll service cuts the checks out because they have to do the taxes and all the other checks.
Yeah. But when you see that reported, and does it say the name of the payroll service that it's going to? Yeah, and then, I mean, that's like if you're buying, I don't know, if you're paying a vendor for food, you don't know who, they're paying somebody to cook the food, probably.
you
It's
don't
just,
have to name your campaign staff.
I think that's different, though.
Basically, you can pay the payroll service, the campaign staff could remain anonymous, no one ever know.
Correct.
Yeah, if you're not giving money, if you're not paying the staff,
So, no, you are paying the staff through a payroll service.
oh.
So let's say the payroll.
Well, the staff works for the payroll service.
No. The staff, so let's say Angela is my campaign manager.
Yeah.
And I'm using a payroll service called Papaya to pay her. And I give the money to Papaya.
Oh.
And then Papaya gives the money to Angela. And all you see on the CARES report is Papaya. You don't see Angela's name.
Because they're literally just writing a check.
Do I have to name Angela on my CARES report, or can I just name Papaya?
Just like a pilot, you're paying. Because that's where you're,
That's who you're paying.
It's going to Angela ultimately. Yeah, that's fine.
But you're paying them to cut the checks or whatever, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the argument. I'm not
You're
sure.
paying Papaya to cut the checks, but you're also paying Angela.
Yeah,
She's
and-
gonna work for you. Me.
She's working for Papaya in that regard,
Well, when you pay Papaya, you're probably gonna have to put a note like campaign payroll or something.
yeah, you'd have to say what it's for, but
you don't have to say who it is if you do it that way.
So that's a way for a campaign staff to be anonymous.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That answers that question. What do you do about, like, I work in marketing, so I have skills in that area. Do I have to pay myself for my skills?
No.
And I actually, like, am employed in marketing.
So like,
So, as long as the candidate, like, if I were a graphic designer, I design my own logo, I don't have to pay myself, even though I am a graphic designer.
no, and the candidate can give as much as they want to the campaign anyway, so that's not a factor, yeah. If you're a graphic designer and you design your own website, or whatever, I don't know if it's the right term, but website designer, and
Yeah.
you don't have to justify that cost or anything. Okay. I wish I didn't, well, I know we have didn't think that, somewhere we have a page like do's and don'ts, and there's things like, there's the corporate contribution, there's the big stuff, and like, if you have yard signs, don't forget to put the disclaimer on them, and any other kind of handout, paid for by you know, the candidate. Put your name, paid for by. Literally, that's all you have to put, paid for by Joe Smith. You don't have to put candidate for anything else. As long as you put paid for by and your name, you're meeting the requirements of the disclaimer. There are no size requirements. You could have a billboard. I shouldn't say this, but you could have a billboard with little bitty paid for by print on it. And you see that. I don't know why you see that, but people do that. We want to try to get more rules about how visible that disclaimer has to be, how, you know, the font size or something, so it means something. But I've seen signs in my neighborhood where I actually had to walk right up to them to see. I could see a little line down there, but like, why do you put it so small? I mean, it's paid for by your campaign. It's not a secret, but it should be visible. We did find a violation for somebody one time when they'd mailed out cards and literally it was printed, the disclaimer was printed in the same color as the background the card was, and it just disappeared. We didn't give her, we found a violation because you couldn't see it, but we didn't fine her a monetary penalty just because she tried, you know. But so keep that in mind and make sure that at least it's a reasonable attempt to identify who's paying for the whatever it might be. We get more phone calls complaining about yard signs and the disclaimers on those yard signs than we do anything else, which is kind of crazy. But as far as complaints, not calls about, I mean, as far as complaints goes, that's the biggest number of complaints we get are yard signs.
What do they complain about?
Just Joe Blow didn't put his name on there, or didn't put his disclaimer on there that is who it's paid for by. And we'll go out there and look, and like, yeah, maybe a little bitty, or maybe written on by Sharpie or something. But as long as it's on there, it's on there.
Can you tell me what the difference is of a campaign, like paid for by, or a committee? Does it have to be like by somebody or friends of, or how that different?
Yes, we see a campaign committee is a specific entity in our statutes. A lot of people will put paid for by committee to elect Joe Smith, and they won't have a committee at all. It's a committee. When KREF looks at a committee, it's a campaign committee that you filed the registration for. It's a separate entity from your campaign. Judges are supposed to use campaign committees, so they are not individually involved with fundraising. They have a chairperson and a separate treasurer. So that's when we say campaign committee, we think that. A lot of times people will think, well, my committee is my group of friends that's helping me get elected. That's not technically a committee. It's just your campaign. You can call it what you want. You can say friends of the candidate or whatever, but it's really not a campaign committee unless you register one with us. Which they had to follow the same rules. It's just a kind of a layer to protect the candidates from being directly involved with the fundraising, because the judicial canon prohibits judges and judicial candidates from asking people for money, even for fundraising purposes.
Yeah, they should not be their own treasurer.
Yeah, they shouldn't be their own treasurer. Yeah,
Can do that.
yeah. That's why they usually create, or they're supposed to create campaign committees. Anybody else may say they have a committee, but it's usually just it's what they're. To us, it's not a committee. I'll put it that way. Now, if a PAC, a permanent committee, pays for some signs for you, then they have to put their name and address on there. Candidate just puts their name. For me, I think I didn't have a set agenda. I just kind of want to make sure you knew who we were and kind of the basic requirements and filing deadlines, contribution limits. And again, I guess I was kind of closed, but I don't have any more questions with, yeah.
So when you set up your bank account with whichever bank, allows you to, what I found is that they require an EIN number, but when you go and apply for it, which category do you select? Because if you do like politics and whatever that one is, it seems like it's for a PAC versus the individual person. So which one do you think?
I think, and I don't know, because I know banks have gotten more strict about that, and some are making it really hard for you to do to do this. I think they expect it to be an individual. I'm sitting here saying individual is different from your campaign, but I think for EIN purposes, I think you picked individual.
It's actually the political organization one.
Is it really?
It's the organization, and then usually based off of the amount of money that you're raising, you are going to file. It's like an 827 form that's tax exempt because you're not like there's rarely that you're going to be paying somebody a certain amount of money per month. So when you go through it, it's going to ask you to click like if you believe that you're going to tax it there. That's the number that you're going to take to the bank for that piece for your EIN number or for your fundraising website.
And I'd be real careful about what you sell, because then you get into sales tax and other.
Yeah, so but that's
Yeah,
the
I
number
would not get into big
Yeah, tell them because I was wrong.
So when you go, it says other, you create your EIN number, you go to other, and then from other, it'll list all these organizations. It says political organization.
That's the one I
And
saw.
even though it looks like it's for PACs, it does qualify for
Okay.
candidates' campaigns.
Okay.
And then what will surprise you though is when you get the IRS paperwork for the next year to file your taxes, and you like, we got to file taxes on this? Like it shakes you for a little bit, but you file an exemption each year based off of what you brought in. Just because of the level of money that you're doing. The other part to that is because you're doing it as a political organization, that's also where that same EI number will be tied into your payroll services. So if that person has to pay taxes or whatever else on their income, that you technically, through your EIN number, will have to create a W-9 for a service or whatever else from that perspective, based off of your tax exempt status. But it is
Get
a
away
political
from having
organization.
interest either, that can be something that you're taxed on. So you don't want to have interest bearing accounts. Unless you got somebody real smart to do it.
Let me add, that kind of highlights why, and it's a requirement anyway, but you're required to have a separate account for your campaign, and that's one, you don't want to mix your personal funds with your campaign funds for multiple reasons, but it's a requirement, and that initial registration, it requires you to put your bank information. We don't want your account number, we just want to know where you're banking. And a lot of banks now, I don't know if a lot, but I hear of banks that will not give you an account until you print out and bring that registration form from us to them.
And big banks don't want campaign accounts either.
Well, now I've heard like the Commonwealth Credit Union won't do campaign accounts. Commonwealth Credit Union in
Oh,
Frankfurt.
really?
I've heard that rumor that they won't do it.
I know Republic and
Really?
Eclipse will.
Yeah, so
Chase won't.
Chase won't know, and I found it out today.
Republic Bank and, oh crap, what's the one that's?
Picture?
PNC will.
PNC will, and then there's I'm forgetting the name of it right now,
Scotia?
but there's a few that are local that are much better. But Republic Bank knows how. A lot of times you'll go into the bank and they will try to convince you have to have an LLC.
Yeah.
You do not need an LLC. I've had so many candidates over the years that the bank convinces them to do that.
We've gotten calls about that too. Yeah, and absolutely not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or they want them to have a business account. It's not a business account either. It's, so it's like.
So it would be, and I'm like, this is outside my. So you would get a personal account, but the EIN is for a campaign or political. I think, but that's outside my knowledge. Anything else? But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
What's the most frequent thing people violate? Like, what are things that are like most commonly that we should be watching out for?
I mean, watch out for the corporate contributions. Look at those checks you get. Some people will give you money, and if your treasurer's not watching that check could have a corporate name on it. It may be signed by an individual in their mind may be giving you a personal check, but if that check has a corporate name on it, we're going to consider it corporate check. Yes?
I'm sorry, that just reminded me, PLLCs, like that are like out of law firms and stuff?
They're considered, I think we may have talked about it before, yeah, they're considered corporations also. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
There was a time, that got more strict.
The easiest one to admit.
Yeah.
To me, because they'll look just like a personal check. And
Yeah.
You need little numbered letters behind it.
There was a time when we were allowing LLCs, but there was a court case that said no, you have to treat all corporations the same. PLLC would be the same as an LLC, the same as a INC, whatever,
How about
PSC.
a 501c4? Is that,
If-
they have to be registered as a PAC?
Some of those 501c4s are corporations. too, though, so you have to watch. But now, if the register is a PAC,
But I was gonna say
a corporation can have a PAC, and the PAC can do the political stuff. That's what PACs are really for. So you may have a LLC or any kind of corporation that has a PAC attached to it for that purpose, and a corporation can support a PAC, the administrative costs of a PAC. They just can't make the contributions or to the campaign or pay for the campaign side of things.
And just stay on top of entering your donations. You gotta wait until the day
Yeah,
before the deadline, and then you're like, oh, this won't enter, and I'm getting these errors and stuff.
Yeah, you can enter them as you go. It'll take the information. You can do it daily, weekly, whatever you want to do. The system will take your entries and save them, and I promise you that works. It doesn't lose them as you go. So you aren't trying to do it in that 2-day window. You've got to file your report.
And then you can't get anybody on the phone there to help.
Yeah, because our phone's ringing nonstop, and I have a small staff. Yeah, help yourself and help us too. Because if you run into a question, if you're a month out from the deadline, we can help you. You'll get our full attention. But if it's the day of the deadline, it's hard for us to cover all the phone calls that are coming in. Thank you. That's a great point to make. Yeah, just do it as you work in there as you go, and call us with your questions. Again, don't ever hesitate to call us with your questions, and ask for somebody will help you or they'll call you back. I feel like we're really good about getting back to people.
Oh, and don't use self-employed when you're entering, like a lawyer. If Bob Jones gave you money as a lawyer,
Or Jasmine.
to put Bob Jones lawyer
Yeah.
instead of self-employed, or it won't take it.
Yeah, those are little things we kick back, and yeah, you'll get warnings. The system will tell you, it'll warn you if you don't put all the information in. If you get a yellow warning message, it will still let you file, but you're going to have to go back and clean up all those warnings. We did that because people will be down at 11:30 at night on the deadline and not able to file because they had a red warning, and so we switched that to say, okay, it's wrong, you're going to have to amend it, but you can go ahead and get them submitted that way. Obviously, you want as few errors as possible before you submit, and we'll kick it back once we review it, but at least you're on time. If you get a red error, that means you're not going to be able to file, and that means probably you're putting something in that report outside the date range that's supposed to go in that report.
It'll usually tell you though.
Yeah, it'll tell you. It'll give you specific messages, and we keep making improvements. And if you ever think, gee, I wish this system would do whatever, let us know, because we're still a work in progress, so we can make improvements. And it's definitely room for improvement.
And I would recommend you reconcile your bank balance for the day that you submit your report. So
They should.
your campaign finance report reconciles with your bank account. I know that sounds elementary to a lot of you.
Yeah, believe me, it's not.
And somebody has to fix it.
Yeah.
And it's not fun.
I
Yeah.
have one question. When
Yes.
you're talking about money you can give back, you said a charity. Can that be a foundation or a nonprofit or?
It has to be a 501c3. Yeah.
They can also do it to a local party.
In a local party. Yeah.
Right, I was asking about the charity.
In charity. 501c3. Yeah. Anything else? Call us, call me. If you go to our emails, you can go to a website and there's a